Shalom, Tzoraim Tovim. This panel will be moderated in English because we have here Dr. Victoria Coates. So this is our small gesture for you.
And Mr. Makovsky?
And Mr. Makovsky knows Hebrew better than me. And believe me, I know him for 30 years. Welcome to our panel discussion with the provocative title that was chosen for us, Israel without the US, can this be? Or as I prefer to frame it, the alliance between the US and Israel, and whether or not Israel can manage without it. If someone had told me a few years ago that this would be a topic of discussion on the esteemed stage of the Herzliya conference, I would have said that it was a waste of time. As someone who lived in Washington for almost a quarter of a century and closely followed this topic, the answer seemed obvious to me. Israel certainly cannot maintain its current position as a regional superpower without a close US support. However, it appears that more and more people in the Netanyahu anti-liberal government, the most extremist government in Israel history, and even Netanyahu himself are flirting with this idea. Netanyahu has declared defiantly against Biden administration. If needed, we will fight with our fingernails. So I'll start with you, Bogie. What is the meaning and the consequence of a weaker alliance between Israel and the United States, and can Netanyahu's government continue to defy almost every idea the Biden administration is suggesting?
Shalom. With my personal experience serving as head of the intelligence, chief of general staff, of course, in my political capacities, I claim that we are lucky to have the United States as ally, as the alliance between Israel and the United States is considered, for those who understand it, as a cornerstone in our national security. It's about defense, security, it's about the economy, it's about the foreign relations policy. United States is our best ally. Looking back to the last year or so, when President Biden proposed the proposal of the alliance in the region, what is called the axis of moderates, to include the United States, Israel, the Arab states, that we enjoy peace accord with them, and to bring in Saudi Arabia to have normalization with Israel, it had become a cornerstone of this government. In the inauguration of the government, the first speech was about that. Then we revealed that there is going to be a judicial reform or a judicial coup, a regime coup. Nevertheless, from that point and on, we witnessed friction between the government and President Biden. On March, he warned us, if you are going not to stay as democracy, we are going to lose one of the main elements of our alliance. And when we are talking with Americans, we are talking about our common interest as well as common values. We are going to lose the common values. The government, of course, denied it.
So what is the meaning of a weaker alliance between our two countries?
I claim that one of the reasons for what we have absorbed on the 7th of October is the fact that there is a gap between the State of Israel, our government, and the administration. Those around us who witnessed it said, wow, they are going to lose one of the cornerstones regarding the national security. This is the opportunity. It's not just that. Even today, if they look around and say, whoa, again, we have a gap, a widening gap between the State of Israel and the administration, this is an opportunity. Israel is going to lose deterrence because of that, and this is the consequences.
David, I would like to ask you to give us the perspective from the US. You know, the administration is talking in diplomatic terms, so I would like you to speak with us Dugri. Tell us what they really think, give us the Torah shebe'al peh, what they are not saying in their public statements.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me in the back okay? All right, thank you. Thank you, Gil. Thank you to Amos Gilad and all the great people at the Herzliya conference. You do it time after time. Amazing. Look, there's no doubt that I want to say, like, here where they're really, the two sides are aligned, here where they're not aligned, and here's where we will know soon if they're aligned or not. It's not yet certain. I would say, you know, since October 7th, we all know what a horrific day that was, killed, raped, burned, beheaded, one of the worst days in Jewish history and second worst day since the Holocaust, but this time there's a Jewish army, and that's a big difference from after the Holocaust. And the U.S.-Israel, I think the administration and Israel worked closely when it come to the goals of Gaza. I think that there is alignment on in terms of the objectives to topple Hamas. We in the United States will not live with ISIS on our border. We can't expect Israel to live with an ISIS on its border. I think that was one sense of alignment. I think the second sense of alignment is clear on Iran attacking an ally. Iran broke a taboo, first time since 1979, the birth of the Islamic Republic, where it attacked Israel, and suddenly Israel saw a glimpse into the future. What is it like to be regionally integrated? The U.S., Saudi, Jordan, Britain, France, all part of a coalition. Didn't come out of nowhere. Several administrations here in Israel and in the U.S. worked together on this for years about the Arrow missile and CENTCOM to make this amazing day possible. As they say in Hebrew, Irua, Rodef Irua, things, you know, one event comes after the next, and you can't even digest it. But it was an earthquake. But this could be the future, and the Biden administration was very proud of that. Where it's not aligned, it's not aligned, to be very blunt, Dugri, as you say, it's not aligned that it's the first time that I remember that, you could always have policy differences. There always will be policy differences with U.S. and Israel. But you never question the motivation of leadership at the top, that they're not driven by the national interest, but they're driven by a sense of pure political survival. That's new. And I hear that always when I'm dealing with the people in the administration, and it's still shocking to them to imagine that. Because if it's political difference, if it's policy differences, the U.S. and Israel worked through this beautifully on Rafah. People said it's going to be bloodshed, 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 bloodbath. And yet the U.S. and Israel worked together, closed the Philadelphia road, and now we'll see if major operations are going to be over in the next week or two that we're hearing from both sides. We'll see. But this not alignment is a question of what is the motivation of the leaders at the top. That's new. The second thing where they're not aligned is, and it's very hard, and I realize in Israel, you know, given everything since October 7th, you don't want to hear about this, but the U.S. is very skeptical, I think, that anyone called Palestinians is going to be anyone but the PA, the Palestinian Authority. You might not call it that in the beginning. You might have municipal structures. You might use the same municipalities, but without the minister of Hamas for this and the minister of Hamas for that. But ultimately, it's going to be the PA, and the Arabs won't come in to give all this money unless they're invited in by a legitimate Palestinian Authority. Now, Israel doesn't want to hear about this, and, you know, some of the people in the government talk about settlements in Gaza. This is so shocking to the United States. And I feel it's something the U.S. can't live with. Where is it not yet clear if they're aligned? Both sides want a diplomatic deal in Lebanon. I think we heard that from Tzachi this morning. It was clear that that's the preference. But in the Middle East, when it comes to brinkmanship, you don't always know where the brink is. So the chance of miscalculation in the Middle East is very high. So everyone might want a hasdara, as they say it in Hebrew, but in the end, that might not happen. So my last point here is the Lebanon deal gonna calm down if there's an end of major operations after Rafah or not? And the big one, the big unknown, and Yair Lapid alluded to it in the previous session, is the question of the Saudi deal. And here's the question that we in Washington are toying with. And some of you will say, no, it won't happen. But the Saudis, behind closed doors, have lowered the bar to make it easier for Israel. Yes, they need political cover after October the 7th. It's true. But they once talked about a time-bound commitment to a Palestinian state, then irreversible steps to a Palestinian state. Now they say credible pathway. And Bibi Netanyahu comes on July 24th to the Congress. It happens to be about the same time that the Knesset goes on recess for 3 months, where in theory nobody could bring him down for 3 months. So the question is does he use that speech to say, I know, of course I want the Saudi deal. Every Israeli wants the Saudi deal. But the price for me to pay is to say something on the word Palestinian. He doesn't have to say Palestinian state. He doesn't have to say irreversible.
David, will he say so? Will he say some path to a Palestinian state?
He won't say Palestinian state, but could he say, I'm willing to engage in benchmarks on security that we can test the idea of a state?
If what you are saying is right, this is a major headline.
It's a huge headline. And we're hearing rumors now of this, and therefore it'll be very interesting. If Biden thinks he's going to hear something positive,
did he get the approval from Smotrich and Ben-Gvir for that?
Well, I don't know, but he's going to have 3 months of a break where they can't have a no confidence vote. And the people of Israel will have to decide, is this such a strategic move that, 3 months is not such a huge risk when you have such a watered down commitment? And I think for Biden, it might be the difference if he knows what's going to be in the speech. And we hear the Israelis are telling the U.S. it will be a consensus speech. We're not going to jam you. We're not going to put you in a corner. But it might be the difference for Biden whether he receives Netanyahu or decides, I'm sorry, I have a campaign rally in Michigan that day, and I just will not be in town the day you happen to be visiting the Congress. So I think it's all eyes on that speech. Is that speech going to be a breakthrough or not? But for that to happen, there has to be an end of operations in Rafah, which we keep hearing, we're here as a week or two out. We'll see if it's right. And if the Lebanon issue calms down as well, this could also be a chance on the hostages. And it's clear that the way out of this crisis is the U.S. giving a commitment to Hamas that after phase one, that phase one will continue till basically after the U.S. election in November. It's not going to be an Israeli commitment. It'll be an American commitment to Hamas. And that's something that the Qataris and the Egyptians can market. So we'll have to see how this plays out. But if I had to look at the timetable between now and July 24th, I think it's going to be a very momentous time in U.S.-Israel relations.
Dr. Coates, after we hear about so many differences, maybe should Israel continue to defy Biden until January 20th, stalling until potential Trump presidency? Many Israelis believe that under Trump, Israel would have a carte blanche to do whatever it wants, to finish Gaza, whatever that means, to build their new settlements, annexing parts of the West Bank, destroying Hezbollah, attacking Iran, name it. Trump will give us everything. It's really interesting to me to hear from you. How do you see these Israelis scenarios and what Israel's best interest to do?
Well, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for the English. I'll have a lot more to say under this scenario. So I really appreciate it being with all of you to talk about this really important discussion topic. I think, with getting back to the purpose of the panel, can Israel exist without the United States, goes to a little bit your specific question, which is, in my opinion, it should not matter who the President of the United States is or who the Prime Minister of Israel is. That's obviously your business. You might have heard we're having an election in November. It can be in the news. But, that can be a sea change. And I think it's very bad for the world when the United States so radically changes policy every 4 years. It creates a lot of chaos, very difficult for you all to plan and for us. And so one of the things we're working on at the Heritage Foundation is a stronger strategic framework for the alliance so that this is not a burning question. Can Israel exist? Sure. Do we want that to happen? Absolutely not. It would be terrible for both of us. And so I think in terms of what the former president would or would not do, in a way we already know. The man's 77 years old. He's unlikely to change. So I think you would see a very similar policy towards Israel. And
Which means what?
Well, what it means is the same kind of very constructive policy we had in the first 3 years of the administration that led to the Abraham Accords.
Building settlements in Gaza? Is that something that is possible?
No, I mean, I don't think this is something that would be helpful, but I haven't heard a majority of Israelis say that's what they want.
Annexing part of the West Bank?
Well, the settlements in the West Bank have been going on for decades. So whether or not the government would choose to do that is, I mean, in a way, that's an Israeli decision, not an American decision. It went on when we had presidents that condemned it quite publicly.
We remember the century deal of President Trump.
I worked
it
on it
calls
for a
for
year.
a Palestinian state at the end of the way, about 70% of the West Bank that will become this Palestinian state, and they will get 30% more in Gaza in order to have this full
The swap.
exactly state. So
That was
is that still the plan?
Well, no, I think that, I mean, there's no way you would say 6-8 years later, the plan that was on offer that the Palestinians rejected after October 7th is going to be the same plan. That just isn't realistic. So I don't think the former president is spending a great deal of time right now formulating a new plan, but I think he would like to build on the success of the last year of the administration. I do think all Americans want to expand the Abraham Accords. I think they were one of the best things to come out of the Middle East in a long time, and they have endured. I mean, I met with the UAE ambassador here yesterday, and extraordinary that with everything that's going on, he's still here. He's still on the job. He's still trying to contribute to some sort of solution. So I think that's where a future Trump administration, again, doing largely what he did, but building on that success.
Is Trump administration is going to ask for a less than a path to a future Palestinian state?
Well, what the former president has said repeatedly is it's not his call, that this is something to be negotiated between the Palestinians and
Remember,
Israel.
1 state, 2 state, whatever you want.
That's what he has said repeatedly, and he said it on the campaign trail now. What he said is after October 7th, it's hard to see. And given public opinion polls in Israel, it's hard for me to see that right now, or that that's a particularly constructive conversation to have right now. And so I think, again, he would not see that as his role to impose.
And normalization with Saudi Arabia, should Israel wait because maybe Israel will get a better deal with Trump?
Well, the issue with the normalization deal, and this is not well understood, is the components that are being publicly discussed, the civil nuclear peace and the security treaty, those are not in the president's authority to promise. Both of those are congressional actions. So you've got to get to 60 senators, and if you know anything about American politics, that's a pretty high bar these days.
Lindsey Graham believes that only Biden can deliver it.
And Lindsey is one senator. There are 99
Very
others.
important one for us.
Well, true, but I think if I were you, I would be cautious about putting all of my faith in 1% of the United States Senate. And so I think both those elements would be controversial for different reasons. Whether or not they can deliver the numbers is anyone's guess, but I think all of this doing it in an election cycle makes it wildly politicized. And for me, that's not optimal. What I want in a Saudi deal is something durable, something that's in the best interests of both countries and of the United States, and is not being done for positioning. And it's so important. I mean, the Saudi is the big one. And quite frankly, when I was living there in the fall of 20, I mean, all of the Saudis I met said it's when, not if. This was 4 years ago. So the decision's been made. The question is timing. What's best for Israel? What's best for Saudi Arabia, the region, and the United States? And so that's a less kind of fevered discussion. But again, I would just be cautious about anyone who, I mean, even Lindsey, who's a friend. I mean, I'm not here to speak ill of him, but again, he's one senator. And so you've got to be cautious with those kinds of promises.
Professor Shain, you are meeting with people in Washington. You are hearing what the atmosphere here. Take us and give us the gist of the feeling and what you are observing lately.
Thank you so much. I think that we are speaking in terms which are, I wouldn't say not relevant anymore, but are completely overseeing the acute nature of the relations and the situation. October 7th and even before has broken something very fundamental in the Middle East. Israel deterrent has been broken. The perception of Israel in Washington has been broken. The White House assembled on the night of October 7th, understanding that the downfall of Israel is a possibility. One should not underestimate that. Since the broken nature of Israel's deterrence started to unfold, and even before that, as you mentioned, there is a process, and it's a structural process, but there is also agency, and I will speak on both. One is a structural process in which it is clear that the Israelis, in some respect, lost their track, lost their vision, and certainly lost their ability to govern. And certainly there are also in the government of Israel some people who are outlandish, to say something, or as American administration high official told me, completely reckless. Israel is becoming...
We know who are they referring to.
Not necessarily, you know, but certainly the case is that Israel is reckless. The fact of the matter is that in Washington, Israel is gradually becoming unattractive. Unattractive in what sense? Israel has sold itself for years as a superpower in the region, as you mentioned. It sold itself as someone who is the startup nation. It sold itself as the best ally to the United States and also the Democratic front, all of which have been deteriorated significantly. The very essence of Israel as something that can really become, I would say, durable and flourishing with $50,000 GDP per capita has gone, perished. I'm not saying anything yet in the public opinion of the United States as a nuisance on the system. So one should not underestimate the decline of Israel, albeit the fact, as my friend Dennis Ross would say, bound to succeed. We have not bound to succeed. It is not a clear case that we are bound to succeed.
Maybe we are not bound to succeed with this administration.
I would
with
say,
the new administration,
I would say
the sky's the limit.
I would say two things. First of all, as I said, there is a structural issue that is broken in Israel. We have seen Iran attacking Israel. We have seen Hezbollah attacking Israel. We have seen the borders are porous. We have seen that Israel can really lead the United States and the world into chaotic situation far beyond what we have known before. The fact that we are still talking about settlement here and there is completely blindness to what has happened since October 7th in the mind and hearts of decision makers in the United States. One should not underestimate it. And I speak to these people regularly. The second is, the American administration here and beyond understand that in Israel there are actors. We're talking about agency and structures. Actors who are completely reckless, as I said. People who can really take them into the abyss of international relations. And they're not by mistake Biden mentioning Smotrich, Ben-Gvir. They understand, and they're leery about that. The second is, and that's the most important question that you have asked beyond that, the United States itself is not a unified body that has a realpolitik policy. It's not necessarily that each administration acts in the same manner. Trump administration, the previous one, of course, had a policy. Everything Obama did, we have to do differently. Completely. Overhaul the entire Iran deal, remember that. And taking us into really the position in which we are facing a nuclear Iran soon. So one should not underestimate. Secondly, the American administrations themselves, the parties themselves, are seeing Israel perhaps something that we have not known before. Perhaps we are no longer as asset for them as we knew before. Think about it. Even for the Trump administration, and I speak to people who supposedly going to be in the Trump administration next, because no one knows who will be if he's elected.
What you are saying, Yossi, is very, very worrying, and I would like Dr. Coates' reaction, because I'm not sure that she sees the same Washington that you are portraying.
We'll finish with one word. I'm sure that everybody has their opinion, and everybody is entitled to their opinion. My sense is that if we will not change our course of action, if the current leadership of Israel will be reckless as it is and will continue, We are in deep, deep trouble. The very essence of your question when you ask why did we even think that Israel can do without America is because there is this kind of absolutely outrageous mindset that existed in Israel, and this is, to me, is remarkable.
Dr. Coates.
Well, I think what I would push back on a little bit, Yossi, is the characterization of the JCPOA and how the Trump administration handled that. The president took a year to review the deal, to attempt to persuade our European allies, who are now singing quite a different tune, actually, that the deal was not preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And when the decision was made to stop complying with it, it having been implemented by the United Nations Security Council, not passed through the United States Congress as a treaty, that was perfectly within the president's authority to do so. And the enrichment that we've seen, the race toward a bomb, has taken place almost entirely in the Biden administration. They were under 4% enrichment when we left office. So I really disagree with the assertion that we somehow are the ones that pushed around toward getting a bomb. What we did was starve them of resources with Israeli assistance and coordination. So they were down to what, $7 billion in foreign currency reserves? That really constrains your ability to act and your ability to do things like that. And that was the president's approach. At the same time, he remained open to negotiations with them. He offered many times.
But what do you think about the fact that he's saying that in Washington today, more and more see Israel not as an asset, maybe more as a liability?
Perhaps we're speaking to different people. We sit on Capitol Hill, so I'm in very close contact with the Congress and actually members of both sides of the aisle, shockingly. They won't admit it, but it's true. And no, I think we see a historic investment of the U.S. taxpayer in Israel. I would call it an investment. And I think that what the prevailing mood is from that branch of the government, and again, always important to remember we have three branches. The administration does not act alone, nor does it have unlimited authority. What I'm hearing is a desire to strengthen the alliance, to be supportive, and to prevent anything like this from happening again. Because as I was speaking with Amos before we came on, sure, this was an intelligence failure in Israel, but everyone who's dealt with this relationship knows that means it was a failure of America as well. So we have to own that.
And the shared values that Bogie mentioned are the important topic for Trump as a president? Is it important to President Biden?
I couldn't speak for President Biden. He doesn't confide in me very often.
No, you speak for President Trump if you can.
No, but I would say for President Trump, it would be very important. And, that's the whole point is, Hamas came for Israel on October 7th. If this isn't handled, it's not going to end with Israel. And what we're seeing on the streets of the United States right now is a very disturbing and powerful reminder that that is the case. And so that's why I think it has to be critical to America to deal with this. And again, regardless of who's in the White House and regardless of who sits in the Prime Minister's office.
Bogie, Victoria mentioned the Congress and what people feel in the Congress. So should Netanyahu go now to give his speech at the Congress? It will be a few days after the RNC, the big convention, and in the midst of an election cycle.
The answer is no. But I would like to elaborate. Henry Kissinger used to say that Israel doesn't have a foreign policy, but only internal political considerations. He didn't imagine that this sentence will be implemented in such a way as our government today is implementing it. And I claim that Israel was considered as an asset, and nowadays it's going to be liability. I agree with Professor Shain. When I met my counterparts, we were joking that Israel is like an American aircraft carrier, USS Israel, as they call it in the Navy, starting from Metula, ending in Eilat.
Now it's smaller.
Providing the American defense establishment with high-quality intelligence on a daily basis, keeping ammunition depots in our region, and not asking the United States to deploy any American soldier to fight for us. And that for $3.8 billion a year, not like they spend in Iraq, 80 billion.
A good investment so far, but
Good
this-
investment,
Yeah.
but we were an asset. And for the United States, strong Israel is within their
If
interest.
60 members of the Congress are not coming, that was the last time with the famous speech in 2016. If 60 or more Congress members are not participating in Netanyahu's speech,
You know, it's going to details. I claim that Netanyahu shouldn't go there. And now what he's considering is internal political interests regarding what is called his base. And for his base, he should be very strong against Biden. Now, President Biden, looking back to what he has done for the state of Israel, I was very critical to Trump and Obama when they decided to disengage with from the Middle East. Biden came with a new idea, engagement. This is the axis of moderates versus the axis of the evil, Iran, Russia, Hezbollah, Hamas, Shia militias, Houthis, and so forth, pushing the Chinese economic influence to the region. It is within our strategic interest. We should obey and say yes to President Biden when he came 10 days after 7th of October. On the 17th of October, he was here, unprecedented visit in which he participated in our cabinet meeting and put on the table a plan how to conclude the operation in Gaza, how to replace Hamas with certain elements, of course, Palestinians, to conclude the situation in the north using Amos Hochstein as representative. And he has a plan. He discussed it with Hezbollah as well as the Lebanese government, the freedom of sailing in the Red Sea, Iran, of course. We should say yes with our reservations on all fields. Instead of that, we said no. Why? Because of political consideration. He spoke about how to release the hostages. Now, Netanyahu understands that if he concludes a war, he doesn't have a coalition. If he will release hostages, he doesn't have a coalition. For his political survivability, he sacrificed all those interests to include the relationship with the United States.
David, you know, Bibi will be in town. So maybe President Biden can save him to fly over. It's a long flight, 12 hours. He has a new airplane, but still it's exhausting. And maybe you should invite him to the Oval Office.
Well, I think it depends what Netanyahu is going to say. Like I said, if he's going to come on the Saudi deal, after he's announced that major operations are over in Gaza because Rafah is concluded, if he's going to say that, if he's on the Saudis, he's going to have something on the Palestinian issue. He's got 3 months of quiet in the state of Israel because there's no Knesset. If he's going to do something, I think Biden would receive him. But if he's not coming with anything new and he's coming to jam Biden, I think Biden will find a way to be on a campaign trip that day. But let's be clear about one thing. The Biden that Israel loves, the reason why Biden thinks of himself as a Zionist is because Israel has something that hardly any country has with the United States. Because countries can have shared interests. Interests, connect to governments. That's what binds governments, are shared interests. But what binds societies are shared values. And the genius of Israel, for close to 75 years, I would say, of its existence, was it understood that it's not just the bipartisanship, Democrats, Republicans, but it's the shared values that link societies. And that's the Israel that Biden loves. That's why he came after October 7th. I mean, the government of Belgium does not have shared values with the American people. I mean, I could say that almost any country in the world doesn't have shared values with the American people. If Israel becomes the government, I'm sorry to personalize this, but if it becomes the government of Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, its relations with the United States are going to decline deeply because it's not enough to have shared interest. It's necessary. Of course you need shared interest, but it's not sufficient. And that's shared values. That's why Biden is a Zionist, because he feels that the two societies are connected. And if Israel wants to go a different direction, and it's legitimate, Israel's a democracy, Israel will make its own decision, but it won't have that same hold on the American imagination as it has had in the last 75 years, and that for different administrations, whether you're Ronald Reagan, or whether you're Harry Truman, or whether you're Bill Clinton, or whether you're George W. Bush, it was the shared values. And that's what connects American Jews. And don't discount American Jews. You know, Israel wants American Jews when they want them, but they won't have them if these trajectories continue. So Israel needs to keep this special magical sauce. The magical sauce is bipartisanship and shared values. Of course, shared interest.
We have to finish in a few more minutes, so Yossi, the floor is yours. What, if there is no meeting between Biden and Netanyahu, what signal does it send?
I don't want to deal with Netanyahu and Biden. I think it's really minimizing this occasion and this issue. The fact that everything was entangled with Netanyahu is a disease for Israeli-American relations, in my opinion. What we have here is indeed, as David said, we have to reconstruct, we have to reshape the issue of values. We have to restate what we believe in. The United States is the land that really has a law-abiding citizen. That's a concept. Constitutional land. Israel has become, in the last year and a half, something banding on a criminal state, something banding on a behavior which is unbecoming to democracies. As therefore, we have to revive ourselves. Reviving ourselves is what people in America are also expecting of us, including American Jewry. We have to revive our democracy to become more attractive in the American mind. And becoming attractive in the American mind is certainly, first of all, asserting our power in order that we will be a strategic ally, because strategic ally is a sine qua non for Israel-American relations, but also defining who we are. Who we are as a Zionist, democratic state that can really be an ally to the United States as we have been. This is really how it has been shaped. This is what it's all about, what we call the unique relationships. This is how it has been all over the years. And notwithstanding whether it's Biden or Trump, with all the issues, but this is the essence of this relations. And I agree with David. If we will go in a different direction, and we will decide that we are somewhat in a messianic state, that we need Urban and we don't need the United States, I can tell you it can be a calamity in Israel. And people in Israel have shown themselves to bring on themselves calamity. They think sometimes they can overcome everything, but we cannot. And we see the challenges are immense, and we have to have America in our corner, and we reestablish ourselves, restart Israel is essential for this.
Dr. Coates, I would love to give the last word for you.
Well, that's very kind. No, I'd like to end on a hopeful note. I mean, I don't want to date myself, but when I was born, Israel was 20 years old. And, you know, to get from 20 to 75, 76 now, you know, is quite a feat. And as you look back at the history of the United States, we're also looking at our 250th in a couple of years. You know, not every moment has been a beautiful, shining moment for us. When I become despondent about the difficult times in which we live, I think about, you know, the 1970s in the United States. And, you know, what a terribly challenging, divisive time that was for us, and the humiliating failure of Vietnam, the assassinations we had endured, a very difficult presidency under Jimmy Carter, a Freudian slip, that we could, you know, we could turn it around. I have nothing but enormous hope for Israel. I mean, I'm not here to comment on your politics. That's your decision. I don't actually I try very hard not to meddle in the politics, particularly of partners and allies, because I don't think that's what we should do to build a strong relationship. But given the trajectory over the last half century, I just have enormous hope and confidence in both our countries over the next half century will be equally successful.
Thank you. And on that note, thank you all for participating, sharing your insight, and to our audience to joining us. And I'll sign off as usual. Gil Tamary, Herzliya.